Hi, this is Chair Riley. Can you hear me okay, Sam?
Yes, sounds good.
Are we all here?
I've only seen 3 commissioners sign in, and you're 4.
Okay. All right. Let's give folks like another minute, and um, then we can get started.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Yeah, I was muted by somebody in the meeting. It said on my, so I saw it, so I've just unmuted myself again.
Yep, we'd like everybody to stay muted for the time being. That'd be great.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Distal.
Okay. This is Chair Riley again. Let's get started. Just get my opener up here. Okay. So the third zoning committee of the St. Paul Planning Commission will now come to order. For the record, the chair of the Planning Commission has previously determined that it is not practical nor prudent for the Planning Commission and its committees to meet in person pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 13D.02. Considering the COVID-19 health pandemic, it is not feasible for any member of the zoning committee to be present at our regular location. Committee members attending this meeting are doing so by telephone or other electronic means. It is also not feasible for members of the public to attend the meeting at its regular location due to the health pandemic and emergency. Arrangements have been made so that applicants and members of the public may also attend this meeting by telephone or other electronic means. Accordingly, no meeting is being held in City Hall Council chambers at 15 West Cadillac Boulevard at this time. Again, this public hearing is being conducted remotely due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This meeting is also being recorded. Even though this hearing is being conducted remotely, the committee's public hearing rules and procedures still apply as if the committee were meeting in its usual place. These rules and procedures are as follows. The zoning committee's recommendations and findings must have a rational basis upon the St. Paul zoning code and applicable state and federal laws. The zoning committee's actions today are recommendations. They are not final decisions. The committee's recommendations are forwarded to the Planning Commission for final action. The committee's recommendations will be considered by the full Planning Commission at its regular meeting held 1 week from Friday. The Planning Commission's meeting is open to the public, but it is not a public hearing. The decisions of the Planning Commission on conditional use permits, non-conforming use permits, site plans, variances, and other zoning permits are final decisions unless appealed to the City Council. The decisions of the Planning Commission on rezoning applications are only recommendations. By state law, the City Council, following a public hearing before it, makes the final decision on rezoning applications. The following rules and procedures govern today's public hearing of the Zoning Committee. The chair will call the secretary to take attendance by the committee. Committee members will need to respond verbally for the record. Committee members During the meeting, please mute your microphone except when recognized by the chair to speak. Discussion is intended for committee members and staff only, except during public hearing items when the chair invites individuals to speak. Staff will be monitoring microphones and muting committee members and members of the public as needed. Use the chat function only to indicate that you have a question or comment. The chat function is part of the official meeting recording. Type Q or question into the chat feature when you have a question, and or C or comment if you have a comment. The chair and staff will monitor the chat function so that the chair may recognize committee members and staff in an orderly way. After being recognized by the chair, committee members should state their name before speaking. This helps others in the meeting and assists with the official recording. When the chair calls the committee to vote on agenda items, the secretary will be called to do a roll call. Committee members must respond verbally for the record and vote either yes or no. Cases will be called in the order they appear on the agenda, and the chair reserves the right to limit the length of testimony if deemed necessary. I'll ask the recording secretary to now conduct a roll call of the committee members that are present for this meeting. Each committee member should acknowledge their presence by saying here. Please take the roll call.
Commissioner DeJoy? Commissioner Grill?
Here.
Commissioner Hood?
Here.
Commissioner Rangel Morales?
Here.
Commissioner Riley?
Here.
Commissioner Said?
Here.
Commissioner Tagia?
Here.
6 in attendance.
Thank you. If you are a member of the public that would like to speak during a specific item's public hearing, you will be asked that you identify yourself at the appropriate time. The public shall not utilize the chat for communicating public testimony, and as it is not considered part of the public record. After I read the item number and title, staff will give an oral report on the item, and then I will open up the floor for committee members to ask questions of staff. After that, I will open the public hearing on the item. All testimony and questions will be addressed to the chair. You may speak in favor or in opposition, and you will be limited to no more than 2 minutes. People who exceed the time limit may have their microphones muted by staff. I will first ask for testimony from those in favor and then from those in opposition. You must provide your name and address for the public record. Please mute yourself during this meeting, except during your 2 minutes when you are specifically called upon to speak. You are allowed to speak only once, with the exception of the applicant, who will be allowed an opportunity to respond to the testimony and answer committee questions. I will now proceed to the first case. We will first take a roll call. I need a motion for the approval of the December 9th, 2021 zoning committee minutes.
This is Commissioner Said. I'll have a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner Said. I have a motion and I need a second. Looks like Commissioner Grill.
Commissioner Grill will second the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Grill. Sam, will you take the roll call?
Commissioner Grill?
Yes.
Commissioner Hood?
Yes.
Commissioner Rangel Morales?
Yes.
Commissioner Tagia?
Yes.
Commissioner Said?
Yes.
And Chair Riley?
Yes.
6 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is the site plan review, and I see that Ms. Anderson is here. Tia, do you want to say anything about site plan review agenda today?
Good afternoon, Chair Riley. No, other than to say thank you. Normally I'm not in attendance at these meetings, and it's reading out the agendas for upcoming meetings. With the holidays last week and this week, our site plan review committee meeting they were canceled. We will resume now next week in the new year. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we have old business first, which is case number 21-320-126, which is 79 Northwestern non-conforming restaurant expansion. And I see that Mr. Rupp is here, and Mr. Johnson, do you have anything? I guess the pleasure of the committee to hear additional information from Mr. Johnson. I assume that he's ready to tell us some more.
Yeah, I have a
All right,
very brief presentation.
Tony, thanks.
All right, so good afternoon, commissioners. The application that you have before you, again, is for the expansion of a non-conforming restaurant at 79 Western Avenue. Just a quick recap. So at the last committee meeting, staff found that all conditions are met for the expansion of the non-conforming use. However, the matter was laid over in order to give staff time to discuss the potential additional condition with the applicant and the condo association regarding access to the structured parking facility. So in this area, we're showing what the issue is. The site currently has 2 curb cuts that are used to serve the parking facilities. The curb cut with the red arrow is a curb cut that leads to the structured parking facility for residents only. And then the blue arrow is indicating the curb cut that serves both the condo association and the restaurant parking. One of the comments that we received requested that the curb cut in red be closed and that access to the full site is entirely through the parking lot. So in response to that comment, staff drafted an additional condition that didn't exist in the staff report, which is here in red. So that additional condition was by June 30th, 2022, the applicant shall receive site plan approval and reconfigure access to the building structure facility, closing the structured parking facility's Western Avenue curb cut and providing access to the structured parking facility through the parking lot. So after the committee meeting, I was able to have a conversation with the applicant. And then I also emailed the condo association president about the issue. And both the applicant and the condo association president let me know that the applicant does not have full site control of the parking lot. So the applicant only has a 10% ownership stake in the parking lot. So the condo association would have to vote to approve reconfiguring the parking lot, and then would also have to pay for some of the costs to do that. The applicant also let me know and sent a picture of the sign here that was erected recently to direct patrons of the business to the surface parking lot and to help resolve that issue of patrons of the business incorrectly using this access point. So based off of the fact that the applicant does not have full site control and that the condo association and applicant has put up a sign to help mitigate that issue, staff is recommending the original 2 conditions that exist in the staff report, which is final plans approved by the zoning administrator for this use shall be in substantial compliance with the plan submitted and approved as a part of this application. And the second condition that staff is recommending is that the applicant shall adhere to all applicable code requirements and obtain a certificate of occupancy for the restaurant dining room. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. The applicant is also here if the committee would like to vote to reopen the public hearing in order to hear from him as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Is there a motion to that end from the other committee members? To reopen the public hearing.
This is Commissioner Grill. I'd like to make a motion to reopen the public hearing to allow the applicant to speak.
Commissioner Sayed, I'll second.
Great. We have a motion and a second to reopen the public hearing. Sam, will you take the roll call on that, please?
Commissioner Hood,
Yes.
Commissioner Said,
Yes.
Commissioner Tagieff,
Yes.
Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner Ringo Morales,
Yes.
and Chair Riley.
Yes.
6 in favor, 0 opposed.
Great. Thank you very much. Mr. Rupp, go ahead.
I think a little background would be helpful. The building, the Commodore building was built in 1920. And when it was built, there was a bar and restaurant built within it. The bar and restaurant was on the main level and there was a ballroom in the basement. In the mid 1970s, I actually am old enough to have been in the parking lot when this happened. The building blew up in a contained gas explosion, largest apparently in the city's history. And the then owner rebuilt the building and removed the ballroom from the basement and constructed an addition to the bar and restaurant in the late 1970s to replace the ballroom. That replacement ballroom is the West Dining Room that's the subject of today's discussion. In 1984, I purchased the bar and restaurant from a man named O'Brien, who had owned the building at the time of the explosion and had built the replacement ballroom. At the time that I bought the bar and restaurant, Mr. O'Brien did not sell me the replacement ballroom, but sold me, because this was a time in which liquor licenses were sold. He sold me a liquor license, and the city, it's in the zoning and licensing files, acknowledged that the license I purchased not only covered the bar restaurant, but covered the replacement ballroom, the West Dining Room that we're discussing today, even though at that time I didn't own it. In 2001, I became the owner of the West Dining Room. At that time, the West Dining Room was covered by a certificate of occupancy, and it had a liquor license. And I began operating it as part of the bar and restaurant and did for 20 years. In 2012, I decided to make an improvement to the decor of the West Dining Room and to add some additional restaurant space. In 2015, I reopened the restaurant after a period of time that it was closed. And the city sent me a notice saying that I was not allowed to use the West Dining Room, even though it had an occupancy certificate and it had been built to be a replacement ballroom and had a liquor license. And I had been operating it for 15 years. So I asked the zoning administrator, Wendy Lane, before she retired, well, what's the history? And this is in the zoning file. What's the history of this dining room? And she did a research and concluded that she agreed, and it's in the zoning file, that the West Dining Room, which is the subject of today's discussion, was in fact built as a dining room. That was the intended use. Now, there has been no change of use by the Planning Commission since, which, as you all know, is required. So time moves along and the city says, well, there's been a change of use. And this was based on a man named Steve Ubel, who's a building official, deciding that he had seen a photo from 10 years before seeing some exercise equipment in this room. So I asked Steve, well, had there been a change of use under the zoning code, or had somebody put some exercise equipment in this room without permission from anybody? And even if he had, what does that have to do with a license, a certificate of occupancy, and correct zoning? Now, let me frame this a little bit. I own the St. Paul Athletic Club and I own the University Club. And in both of those cases, I have liquor licenses and zoning approval to use the entire building for food and beverage service. So if I in those two buildings want to serve lunch and a glass of wine in the exercise room, I can, which was decided in the late 1970s when the replacement ballroom was developed. So now you move forward and the city revoked my occupancy certificate and suspended my liquor license because I defended my right to be able to continue to use the West Dining Room, that's the subject of today's discussion, which I had been using for 20 years and had been fully inspected, insured, licensed, and had an occupancy certificate. And the city never responded as to why it thought that what I needed to do in today's hearing was to apply for the expansion of a non-conforming use, as opposed to the establishment of a legal non-conforming use for a use in existence for 10 years. The use has been in existence since 1979. This is a mess. And the city's made a series of mistakes that have bankrupted a business. And ironically, the Commodore Bar and Restaurant is one of the most famous bar and restaurants and live entertainment facilities in the city. And the city closed it on its 100th anniversary 2 years ago. So to say I think this whole thing is an outrage is an understatement. So when I filed my request, I filed under the establishment of a legal non-conforming use status for use in existence, because clearly it had been. And the city said, "Oh no, we don't want to do that." The planning staff, we want the zoning committee and the planning commission to consider it under the expansion. Well, okay. And so what I said was, well, even though this has been an outrage, what my interest is to get the place reopened. And so I said, well, whatever it's going to take to get me to allow me to reopen a business I've owned since 1984, that I operate in the West Dining Room for 20 years, I'll do. But I want the record to be kept that I think the way in which this is being done is inconsistent with the facts, although I'll accept the zoning committee saying that they're allowing the expansion of a non-conforming use, even though the non-conforming use has been legal since about 1979. I'd be very happy to answer questions, since I suspect there will be some.
This is the chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Rep. Appreciate your time. Are there any questions for the applicant or for Mr. Johnson from the committee?
Say, what are you doing?
Commissioner Tagihouse, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to follow up. I'd like to thank Mr. Rupp for his testimony, and that question had also occurred to me. Why this application and not an application that specifically addresses the dining room alone? And I would direct that question to Mr. Johnson.
Chair Riley, Commissioner Tagioff. The applicant is correct that he could apply for either. He could have applied for the expansion of non-conforming use or the establishment of non-conforming use. And in his original application, he indicated that he wanted to apply for both. However, I advised him to apply for the expansion of non-conforming use because in his original application, he provided no proof aside from his word that the restaurant has been in existence for more than 10 years. And so that was my advice of why to go down this route. That answers your question.
And as a thank you, it does. And as a follow-up, if you wouldn't mind, when all is said and done, is there a difference in outcome? I mean, obviously the application is different, but technically, does this leave him in a materially different position than if he pursued the other route?
Chair Riley, Commissioner Tagioff, no, it doesn't. The outcome is the exact same.
Thank you.
Do any other commissioners have any other questions for Mr. Rupp? Okay. All right. Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this particular application? I'm not expecting anyone to be here on this particular application other than Mr. Rupp. I just want to check. There's a lot of people here. Okay. Mr. Rupp, did you want to respond to Mr. Johnson's answers or to Commissioner Tagioff's questions?
Yeah, as I already said, I applied both ways. And the evidence that I'd been in business was that it's been part of the bar and restaurant since I purchased it in 2001 for 20 years, and it had been inspected by the city and been given an occupancy certificate, and it had a valid liquor license in it. And I had been using it for 20 years. So it's hard to prove the negative that somebody says I haven't been using it. But notwithstanding that, the outcome is what I'm most interested in here at the moment, is to be able to use this room, because without being able to use it, it will never reopen. It's crucial that business have that additional space in order to develop enough income, particularly in this COVID period, to develop enough income to support the overhead of that business and hire the employees back. So I don't want to debate any further the argument about whether or not I should have been allowed to establish a legal non-conforming use for a use in existence for 10 years, other than to, on the record, say that I think I should have been given that. Because I'm happy with the outcome if I can get my business reopened.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. And that is definitely included in the record. Thanks very much for your time today. And I'm guessing there's no one else here to speak on this matter. So I think we should close the public hearing and take a motion from the committee. Commissioner Grill.
This is Commissioner Grill. I'd like to move the staff recommendation with the 2 associated conditions. So final plans approved by the zoning administrator, and then the applicant shall adhere to all applicable code requirements and obtain a certificate of occupancy for the restaurant dining room.
Sorry, I've got parking dogs. Thank you, Commissioner Grill. Is there a second? Commissioner Said?
I'll second with the motion.
Great. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this motion, on the motion? All right. Seeing no discussion, Sam, will you take the roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Hood,
Yes.
Commissioner Said,
Yes.
Commissioner Tejia,
Yes.
Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner Ringo Morales,
Yes.
and Chair Riley.
Yes.
6 in favor, 0 opposed.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Tony, for communicating with Mr. Rupp and getting him on the call today. Effectively appreciate everybody's time, and we will hear this. We will finalize this decision hopefully a week from tomorrow. And we will now move on to new business.
Thank you very much.
The first item of new business today is item number 21-324-323, 647 York rezoning, which is rezoning from B3 general business to T2 traditional neighborhood at 647 York between Payne and Greenbrier in District Council 5, Ward 6. And Mr. Dermody is here to present that item.
Good afternoon, committee members. I just want to briefly present the case before you today. This rezoning is for 647 York Avenue East, which is outlined here. It is a strange situation where a connected L-shaped building is on multiple parcels. We're just talking about the southeasternmost part of that building, which is 647 York. It's all zoned B3 general business today, and the request is to rezone that to T2 traditional neighborhood. Another view of that building here, it's got a parking lot to its west along Payne Avenue. And to just show a street view of what this looks like. Wrong way. There we go. It's this building here. As you can see, it doesn't have a traditional storefront or anything like that. It did have commercial uses on the lower floor at one point in time. It actually has been vacant on that floor for quite a while, and the request for this rezoning would allow them to use that all for residential purposes, just as the rest of the building is. And so that would allow additional residential units. This rezoning is recommended for approval by staff. It meets the findings in the staff report, including that this is consistent with the comprehensive plan, which designates the site as basically on border between mixed use along Payne Avenue and urban neighborhood to the east. The T2 zoning district is an effective transition between the B3 community business and all the uses, the business related uses along Payne, and then the residential uses to the east. And it brings this site into functional use, keeps with the times and allows expansion of the tax base. So for all those reasons, staff recommends approval of the rezoning request. I'll also note that the district council recommends approval as well. I believe Mr. Nagasa is here, but first I'll take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Derby. Are there any questions from the committee? Commissioner Tagioff.
Just a small one. It looks from the report that the building kind of straddles a parcel, and I guess my question is that true, or is the building entirely contained within this parcel? And I assume that doesn't create any problems, because then you have a building that's partially T2 and partially B3.
This building is completely contained within the parcel. The maps attached to the staff report show it as being kind of on the boundary, and that's just a function of imperfect mapping, especially the aerial photo. It's taken from an airplane that is not simultaneously above everything when that photo is taken. So, things tend to be off by a couple of feet here and there, and that's the case with this situation. What's being requested would rezone the entire building. Of course, it is connected to another building behind it, but this building would not become split zone. It would just have T2 zoning if approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Tagioff and Mr. Dermody. Anybody else on the commission have a question? Committee, rather. I have a quick question that maybe you could answer another time, Bill, but wondering when Payne Avenue will be rezoned entirely to T2, or at least studied for that purpose.
That's a good question, Chair. I would say that it is not on the staff work plan for 2022, and beyond that, I'd have to defer to Mr. Pereira, who is not here today.
I appreciate that. Thanks. All right. Are there any? Let's see. I think the applicant is here. If he has anything to add. Otherwise, I go there. Mr. Nagasa, do you have anything to add to Mr. Dermody's presentation?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, Mr. Dermody has presented my case very well. I don't have anything to add unless some people have questions for me.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Nagasa. Does anybody have any questions for the applicant? Or anybody on the committee have any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Said, go ahead.
I don't know if I hear, but can we get his address, Mr. Nagasa?
Thank you, Commissioner Said. Excellent point. Mr. Nagasa, can you tell us your address for the record, please?
My address is 8083 Kimberly Lane North, Maple Grove, Minnesota 55311.
Thank you very much. And we'll open the public hearing, and I'll see if there's anyone here to speak in support of this application. It's the application for the rezoning of 647 York Avenue between Payne and Greenbrier Street. Anyone here to speak in favor of this application? Anyone here to speak in favor of this application, 647 York Avenue? All right, I'll see if there's anybody here to speak in opposition of the application to rezone 647 York Avenue from B3 general business to T2 traditional neighborhood. Anyone here to speak in opposition? In the interest of time, I'm going to ask one last time, then we can close the public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak in favor or opposition for this application? All right, seeing none, close the public hearing. And does anybody have a motion that they'd like to make or anything to discuss? Well, let's start with a motion. Commissioner Said, go ahead.
I would like to make a motion for staff recommendation to approve.
Great, thank you. We've got a motion to approve the rezoning, recommend approval of the rezoning following the staff recommendation. Is there a second for that from the committee?
This is Commissioner Grill. I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Grill. Sam, will you take the roll call, please?
Commissioner Hood,
Yes.
Commissioner Said,
Yes.
Commissioner Tejeda,
Yes.
Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner Rangel Morales, and Chair Riley.
Yes.
5 in favor, 0 opposed.
Great, thank you. And that recommendation will go before the Planning Commission 1 week from tomorrow, and subsequently the recommendation will go on to the City Council. Thank you for your time today, Mr. Nagasa, and we will move on to our next item, which is the rezoning of 1128 Mccubbin between Jessamine and Maryland Avenues from R4 1 family residential to RT1 2 family residential. And we have Ms. Rosendahl to present. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Riley, and good afternoon, commissioners and the zoning committee members and our guests and applicants. Let me share my screen here. I've got a brief presentation. Are you seeing the screen for the PowerPoint?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Great. So the subject property address is 1128 Mccubbin Street. And again, it's a rezoning from R4 to RT1. The site location here is on the east side of Mccubbin between Jessamine and Maryland. You can see the proximity to Lake Loeb and Marydale Park here. It's a real nice location. The aerial is a little older. This older home was demolished, and we'll get into that history a little bit. The lot today is vacant. There was access off of Mccubbin, and there's an asphalt driveway still there. There's a single family home with a detached garage right to the north. And as you're standing there and you pivot due north, you can see how close to 2 apartment structures there are just to the north there. And the property to the east is a single family home with a detached garage, as is this home on the far right is just to the south. It has a very nice view of the park. Here's looking across the street at what you see there with the open space, passive and active parks and recreation land use. The zoning map here shows that the abutting parcels just north, east, and south are that R4 is mentioned, and then it's very close proximity to this RM2 medium family, multifamily, medium density multifamily, and RT1 2-family district shown in gray between the blocks here of Mccubbin and Norton. And the structure that was recently just demolished was a 1913 home. This R4 zoning was established in 75, and then at some point over time, it did convert to a 2-family use because we had a truth and sale housing report in 09 that showed the property was inspected and verified as a legal non-conforming duplex. However, that same year, I did come across a DSI inspection letter that condemned the property due to multiple deficiencies, revoking the certificate of occupancy and ordering the property to be vacated. And then in late 2020, City Council acted, finding it still unimproved and vacant, ordering the raising of the structure pursuant to what's called a resolution for a substantial abatement order. And then the home was in fact demolished earlier this year. I want to say June, but it was sometime early summer. The applications and staff report was submitted to the Housing and Land Use Committee for the North End Neighborhood Organization, which reviewed the case and voted on recommending approval from R4 to R1. So they did submit a letter of support, which is in the packet. And our findings here are just, again, the R4 to R1 to allow for the proposed duplex, and that we feel that it's compatible with the surrounding uses because it's the same residential use classification. The RT1 zoning allows for the two-family residential use. It's compatible and it's consistent with the way the area has developed historically. And as I pointed out a moment ago on the zoning map, that block between Mccubbin and Norton does have a mixture of one family, two family, and medium density multifamily. So this parcel, this location does make sense. And I did note that the subject parcel is approximately 65 feet from those two districts, the RM2 and the RT1. It's also consistent with the comprehensive plan, as I know you're all very familiar with the urban neighborhood designation of the future land use plan, of which this parcel is designated, and housing policy H48 applies then for properties in urban neighborhoods, guiding decision makers to expand permitted uses to include duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, small scale multifamily, and accessory dwelling units to allow for neighborhood scale density increases, broadened housing choices, and intergenerational living. The other fact that I wanted to find was that, in fact, as per section 66.231 of the code, the minimum lot area and lot width dimensions are met for the R21 zoning district, and the lot itself is 65 by 127 feet deep, which should have sufficient area to design and develop a duplex to code standards, which would be a continuation of a two-family residential use on the lot. And in the spot zoning analysis, we don't believe that it would be considered spot zoning because, again, it's that same residential classification, that category of all residential uses, which are consistent with one another at that varied density level on the block. So staff recommendation is giving all these findings. We recommend approval for the proposed rezoning from R4 one family residential to the RT1 two-family residential for 1128 Mccubbin Street. And with that, I can take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Rosen.
The applicant and his architect is here this evening.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any questions for Ms. Rosendahl from the committee members? All right, Mr. Vu, would you like to add anything to the report, or your architect? Either of you, and please state your name and address for the record before you speak. Thank you.
Kevin Vu, and my address is 1158 7th Street East, St. Paul, Minnesota 55106.
Mr. Lee, I think you're still muted.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
My been mute. Okay, my name is Hong Lee. I'm an architect for this project. My address is 5111 Avenue South in White Park, Minnesota 56387. Okay. I'm a project architect for this project. Like I say, that along with me is Evan Hall. He's going to be talk more about the context, how this duplex will fit into the environment and close to the neighborhood and compatible with the neighborhood. Evan Hall, can you come in and talk to more about that?
Absolutely. My address is 1276 Berkeley Avenue, St. Paul, Minnesota 55105. I'll be extremely brief. Marilyn Rosendahl was so thorough in her research on this property. I just wanted to note that the property is just a half block south of Maryland Avenue and east of Dale Street. So it's in a very kind of central location on two bus lines, number 3 bus line and the number 63 bus line. And as Marilyn mentioned, it's across the street from Loeb Lake, which is part of Marydale Park. It's a great amenity to have not one family, but 2 families directly across the street from a park like this. And we're just really thrilled to have the opportunity to put together a humble 2-code building that follows the zoning code and all the building codes to put new construction here to allow 2 families to live in a duplex that really fits the neighborhood scale and also is safe, unlike the previous duplex on this property.
Great, thank you very much. Does anyone on the committee have any questions for the applicants? Okay, seeing none, is there anyone here to speak in, I guess we'll open the public hearing and call for anyone to speak in favor of this application? Anyone here to speak in favor of the application to rezone from R4 1-family residential to RT1 2-family residential at 1128 Mccubbin Avenue East, Street East? Anyone here to speak in opposition? Anyone here interested in speaking in opposition to this application? Pretty sure everybody's here for the next 2 items. So I'll ask my last time, anyone here to speak in support or opposition of this application, 21-323-222 for 1128 Mccubbin. All right, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion from the committee.
This is Commissioner Sayed. I have a motion to approve staff recommendation for rezone from RT4 to 1-family residential.
Thank you, Commissioner Said. It looks like Commissioner Grill, you are contemplating seconding.
This is Commissioner Grill. I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Grill. Any discussion on this item? All right, Sam, will you take the roll call, please? And pardon my cat as she enters the screen.
Commissioner Hood,
Yes.
Commissioner Said,
Yes.
Commissioner Tegia,
Yes.
Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner Rangel Morales, and Chair Riley.
Yes.
5 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you to the applicants and to Ms. Rosendahl. We will make this recommendation to the Planning Commission 1 week from tomorrow, and subsequently it'll go before the City Council as well. So the next item on our agenda
Thank you.
is, and I'm going to do a little preamble kind of to this. So the next item on the agenda, there's 2 items for 470 Lexington. There's actually 3 applications for a conditional use permit with variances and site plan review and whoops. And so we will hear both staff presentations, one from Mr. Jervy and one from Ms. Scarda, one right after another. That way we'll have all the sort of information all at once, and we'll make decisions on 2 separate motions at the end. And I just want to remind everyone that the only thing to that the public comment and the testimony in the hearing today will address are items related to the zoning applications specifically themselves. That's for a conditional use permit and related variances for the property at 470 Lexington Parkway. as well as the site plan for that site. And we will not address during the public hearing any other issues that are not related to the zoning cases themselves. And with that, Mr. Jervy, you want to go first?
Sure. Chair Riley.
Or was, sorry, was Ashley going to go first?
I think
Ashley,
Anton mentioned that he was going to go first yesterday. Sorry.
Thank you, committee members. Let me just pull up my presentation here. And I am substituting for Mike Richardson. This is usually his neighborhood, but he is out on parental leave. And as a side note, I'm happy to report he has a healthy baby girl with Walona. So just wanted to give you all the good news. Can everybody see the presentation?
Yes, sir, and thank you for that news. I was a little afraid to ask.
Some good news in 2021. So this presentation is for 470 Lexington Parkway. There's a conditional use permit for height and application for variances for side and rear yard setbacks. The location is at the intersection of Lexington Parkway and James Avenue, the south east quadrant there, taking up the entire block of 6 parcels. And you'll see it's a mix of mostly single family duplex homes to the north and directly across Lexington to the west. And then across Randolph is a mix of multifamily and mixed use with Trader Joe's at the corners, the most obvious landmark. And then immediately to the east is 35E right away. The zoning for the area is RM2, was recently rezoned RM2, approved by the Planning Commission and City Council in 2000. To the north is R4, to the south is T2 for that kind of commercial node right at Randolph and Lexington. And then in the other quadrant of Randolph and Lexington to the south, southwest is RM2 and with a little bit of RM3 very south there. The other main factor about this side is quite a bit of grade change. So you'll see here, this is the parcels in question encompassing the site. And these are 5-foot increments. So you see the grade changes from the highest point in the northwest of the site down 25 feet to the lowest point in the southeast corner. So some background on the site, it is just over 28,000 square feet, 0.64 acres. In September 2020, the site was rezoned from R4 to RM2, excuse me. In March 2021, earlier this year, the Planning Commission approved a CUP for height and variances for setbacks for the front, rear, and both side yards. And the proposal at the time was 91 units. The height of the proposal was for 65 feet, 8 inches. Just as a reminder for projects in RM2 over 50 feet, they require a conditional use permit. You can go up to 75 feet with a conditional use permit. The project at the time was granted a front yard setback of 18 feet, rear yard setback of 0 feet, and both side yard setbacks of 10 feet. And just to compare it to what we have in front of us today, the project has increased in size a bit. So it is now 114 units. The conditional use permit for height is to get up to 69 feet, 10 inches, 0 foot rear setback, and 10-foot north side yard setback and 4.5 south side yard setback to the balcony and 10 feet to the wall. So here's the image of the proposed project. It's fronting on Lexington Parkway, 5 stories of multifamily, 114 units. You can see the breakdown here. 10% of the project is proposed to be at 60% AMI affordability level, and this allows for a 0.5 increase in floor area ratio maximum per section 66 231E. And these 5 floors of units are above 2 floors of parking access from James and the Eastern Alley for 82 spaces and 114 bike parking stalls. This is the site plan for the site, Lexington Avenue, the front door, or Lexington Parkway, excuse me, front door is here with the main building entrance just off Lexington. The second floor parking entrance is off James, and the first level parking is off the dog leg of the alley here. And so the public alley goes along the back of the building, or south end of the building, and then, or I guess side of the building, and then around to the rear of the building on the east side. These are the elevations looking on the west side and east side. This is the front. On the, you'll see this is the kind of shortest portion of the building, given the grade change. And in the back here in this corner is the tallest portion. And the way height is measured in the zoning code is by taking the average grade around the building. Here's the south elevation from the alleyway, and you'll see here's the building fronting on Lexington, some portion of the building setback in the middle here on the residential levels, and then the portion of the 5th floor setback an additional few feet, including from the eastern side of the building. And finally, the north elevation. Again, you'll see the setback for the residential levels in the middle portion of the building and that 5th floor setbacks. So some changes from the previous application, just because I figured this question would come up. This is the image from the previous application. So you see a very similar building. As I mentioned before, you're increasing the size by 23 additional units, increasing the height by 4 feet 2 inches. And in this district, this increases the required setback for side and rear setbacks. There's a larger 5th floor than the previous application, larger footprint, reconfigured balconies on the west and south facades, and some surface parking removed along the alley. And just to kind of show these in another form, this is the current outline of the building, outlined in this blue line, superimposed upon the previous site plan for the project. So you can see this kind of southeastern portion of the building's larger footprint, as well as the balconies in the locations in this southeast corner and western side of the building, protruding into the setback. So the height conditional use permit findings is consistent with the comp plan. And one thing to note is Randolph and Lexington are arterials with transit, and these are the areas where we want density as identified in the comp plan. You also see the other policies from the land use chapter and the housing chapter in the staff report. There's adequate egress and ingress. The use will not be detrimental to the existing character. And I am noting the there's ash tree removal on James Avenue, and this is the removal plan. These are mature trees, and they will, removing those trees, which we need to do, or the applicant needs to do, will kind of open up James Avenue a bit to the homes across the street. So we are recommending that they replace those trees with as large caliper as possible. City's foresters recommended 4-inch caliper. And you'll see that in the conditions of the recommendations. The use will not impede normal development, and the use will conform to all other regulations subject to the variances included as part of this application. So the setback variance findings, I'm going to kind of discuss them all together here, call out a few features regarding or about each. So section 66 to 31K says the minimum side and rear setback shall be 9 feet plus half the building height for buildings over 50 feet. So for a 69-foot, 10-inch building, this means required setbacks for a side and rear is 18 feet, 11 inches. And the findings is consistent with the findings, required findings in the comp plan for all the variances, that they're in harmony with the intent of the zoning code. The variances are consistent with the comprehensive plan. There are practical difficulties complying with the provision. The plight of the landowner is not due, or is due to conditions unique to the property, and the variance will not alter the essential character of the surrounding area. For the front yard setback, is actually 0 foot required per section 66 231 footnote F. But we still think the setback as proposed is important due to its location on Lexington Parkway. The rear yard setback allows for that larger front setback. And additionally, the 35E right away to the east kind of mitigates the need for setbacks on that side of the building. And then regarding the side yard setbacks, as I pointed out in the elevations, the middle portion of floors 1 through 5 are setback to lessen the impact. And the requested setbacks also allow for balconies on the southeast corner of the building. And these are generally similar to porches and decks, which have exemptions in the setback requirements for single-family homes. This is a diagram from the applicant about the setbacks showing the basic building footprint with the balconies here, the required setback location of this dotted line, and then the level 5 footprint, how it's setback even further. So based on the findings, I'm recommending approval subject to the following conditions: that final site plans approved by the Planning Commission or zoning administrator for use shall be in substantial compliance with the plans submitted as part of this applications with sign off from relevant city departments. 2, to comply with the floor area ratio under section 66 231E prior to receiving a certificate of occupancy for the new building or building expansion. Demonstration of the commitment to affordable housing must be provided as a deed restriction or other contractual agreement with the city or a city housing and redevelopment authority, financing agreement or other similar financing agreement, and documentation of low income residence qualifications. 3, a minimum front yard setback shall be 13 feet 9 inches to balconies and 18 feet to the wall per the plan submitted as part of this application. And 4, boulevard trees planted in the James Avenue right away per the plans submitted as part of the application should be minimum 4-inch caliper, subject to review and approval by the city forester. And with the With the application, or we also received testimony, 2 letters in support, one from the McAllister Groveland Community Council and 1 additional letter, and then 10 letters in opposition. Generally, those letters in opposition cite the lack of perceived lack of compatibility with the neighborhood, and insufficient demonstrated need for variances. I will note too that on some of the letters of opposition, they were quoting a previous staff report for the previous application of reasons why it was incompatible with the neighborhood, but the planning commission did not support those findings, and those were not included in the resolution approved by the planning commission. And with that, I am done with my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions now or wait until after Ashley presents, whatever you prefer.
This is Chair Riley. I don't have a preference. Does anybody in the committee have a preference? Anybody want to ask burning questions now, or can we wait until Ashley's done? All right, go ahead, Ashley. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks, Anton. And I'll try to not duplicate content. So in theory, what I'm presenting on specifically is the site plan review, which normally that process comes through me and Tia and other staff and a review committee with all different city departments, and we look to make sure that plans have all the right notes and things they need to comply with all our departments, or the various city departments. I'll be going over that. Just wanted to point out, I don't think this view was in Anton's report, but there's some apartments, kitty corner across Randolph and Lexington down that way. So a little bit of history, key dates that weren't really covered so far is that after the last visit to Planning Commission, the project team came in and started working with, sorry about that, Tia and I's group to get some preliminary feedback on the types of things they'd need to consider as they move forward to getting their, building permits, their more technical permits. And we gave them some preliminary feedback just in a letter, feedback towards their plan sheets on November 17th. They were able to look at that feedback, take things into account, and then revise the plans to meet some of the, more technical things like, make sure the sidewalk width is noted, better be, 6 inches thick or whatever, all those types of technical things. And then the formal application for both the site plan and the CUP variance were received on December 8th, which gets us here today. We already talked about kind of the surrounding zoning and the surrounding uses, but something I'd like to highlight that's specific to site plan review is that MnDOT and Ramsey County and Parks, who all have some joint jurisdiction in the right-of-ways around these properties, they all weigh in and they all give feedback based on their, if Parks has any plans for, they wanted to check to make sure any existing like bikeways or any existing things they've done recently comply with the new proposal. MnDOT wants to make sure that any of their important construction notes are on the plans, that type of thing. So for this one, I believe MnDOT and the city have joint jurisdiction on the alley, which is kind of unique. And then MnDOT has the on-ramp, and then Parks and Ramsey County have Lexington. Believe we covered most of these facts in the last presentation. But just to double note, there are two bus lanes that come to this corner. It's very convenient to 35E, and they'll make sure there's like the correct like bus pads, I believe they're called, for wherever the bus stops. And then there's bike lanes for both Lexington and Randolph. There's a front area along Lexington that has some exterior bike racks. There's also bike racks for each parking stall, as well as an additional bike room with some like bike fixing amenities, that type of thing. I think this was the original plan before they had the 4-foot caliper. So just ignore those tree sizes and note the proposed 4-foot caliper there. This is the plan that was, revised to meet most of the feedback. I will note one thing that's kind of tricky with the joint jurisdiction. I mentioned that the alley was both the city and the state. We're trying to help the project team get a hold of both groups so we can make sure everyone's on the same page of how to make the alley like meet the minimum width for two-way traffic and make sure that everyone's is satisfied. So I wanted to point that out now because I have a condition relating to it later. And the project team's been, great trying to sort through that. It's just when it's one jurisdiction, it's easier. When it's multiple, it's a little tricky. As they noted that the entrances to the parking are here along the alley, which is by the frontage road, not over here kind of mingling with these neighbors that share the alley. In the front, they chose to place it across from an unimproved alley and some trees instead of across from the houses or residences that were on the block, so that as people are going in and out, it's not lights right lined up with someone's windows or something like that. So on to the findings, which when a site plan comes to the Planning Commission, there are 11 findings code asks us to look at. And we look at that through the lens of kind of all the reviews groups, the zoning code. And here's what they end up coming out as. So we want to make sure that the site plan is consistent with the city's adopted comp plan and development plan for other areas of the city. So the 2040 comp plan, as well as the Matt Groveland community plan from 2016. In both, it was, generally consistent with a lot of the policies in the plans, especially relating to ones around supporting additional density by planned transit areas, growth and development near major corridors. In the Matt Groveland plan, they noted on H2.5 to support multi-unit mid-sized developments along the main corridors, specifically Randolph. And to, make sure to support land use that has a good pedestrian-oriented human scale streetscape, which, sorry if you can't see that, the front here, for something on a hill, they really wanted to make sure that they had a good front entry, good plans for busing, amenities for bikes, that kind of thing. The second finding to be met is that it meets with the applicable ordinance of the city. And we did check to make sure that it complies with the zoning code, which it does, assuming that the variances that were mentioned in Anton's presentation would be approved. And the other things that we looked at, a lot of that comes down to, in the wrong buttons here. Oh, I think it's frozen. The main things I'd be looking at are the residential density and dimensional standards about, size, floor area ratio, and then the multiple family design standards, the percentages of windows and door openings, anything relating to materials, things like that. And they were found to be in compliance, so that condition's met. For the third finding, the condition is met that the property and the project proposed meet the typical intent of the RM2 medium density multifamily district. And it's not located with any significant historic districts, in any tree preservation. It's not in the river corridor. Just normal in a neighborhood near a intersection with some transit. So that condition is met. The fourth finding is protection of adjacent neighboring properties through reasonable provisions such as surface water drainage, plumbing code, all those types of things, zoning code that talks about sound and sight buffers. And from what the team was able to provide us, we decided that the effect of this proposed residential building on the surrounding properties is reasonable for the RM2 and to meet the intent of that zone. They've got a large underground detention basin to capture extra rainwater, slow that down, have runoff rate control that meets the required standards for the area. Like I said, they're meeting the minimum design character with the window and door openings. They've provided pedestrian scale areas in the front as well as the entries, nice lighting to kind of call attention to the entry areas. They did provide a shadow study, and in their redesign of the building, they paid close attention to make sure they didn't increase the angles at which the sun would come down so that it would make the situation shadier for the neighbors. And it was a reasonable shadow study with, in the most extreme times of year, there were a couple hours of more shade in just, minimal parts of a few yards, which that is, a normal kind of parameter. We noted the trees already, and the bike parking. Also, it's kind of pretty convenient to have an off-ramp and that like side way to squeak around. So if there was traffic on Lexington, anybody who's leaving the site would still have a quick way to do that. For finding number 5, talks about the arrangement of the buildings in ways to try to reduce effect on abutting neighbors. And what I was talking about earlier with placing the front driveway across from the trees and the unimproved alley, that's kind of the intent of those. Like, are we thinking about where we're putting the driveways so it's not across from someone's bedroom or something like that? So that the site plan we found does meet that finding. As far as creation of energy conserving design through landscaping, location, orientation, and elevation of structures, anything that's in the codes as is were met. And realistically, there's general facts out there about how multifamily with 5 units and up is a energy conserving design. So yeah, they've met the minimums. They are meeting current building and energy codes with their plan and anything they turn in that's approved. So that condition is met. For number 7, for safety and convenience of the vehicular and pedestrian traffic, both in the site and then relating to everything surrounding, we found that it does meet the finding. All modes were considered in the site design. And as I mentioned, there was a lot of multi-jurisdictional talk there about specifically what to do. I did note that they are going for the goal of two-way traffic in the alley, and we just want to make sure we coordinate so that we can get the box checked from both MnDOT and the city. And so I think the way we put it was that sign off of the site plan and supporting documents by all site plan review staff for technical compliance shall be a condition of the approval of the site plan. So when you hear my condition, that condition later, a lot of what that's getting at is that we want sign off from all groups on the final decision of the exact width of the pavement in the alley for safe two-way traffic there. And not two-way traffic like a street, but more as if you're coming out of the garage and I was turning into the alley, we would, be able to politely pass each other without causing an inconvenience. There was also a traffic memo that was prepared by a traffic consultant group, and they noted that no significant impact to the area traffic operation is to be expected because of the proposed development, and that it's on par with other multifamily buildings up Lexington, down Lexington, the one right off Randolph, and quite a busier traffic pattern at Trader Joe's. Finding number 8 relates to satisfactory availability of our storm sewers and sanitary sewers, which Public Works has given a look over the plans, and they do have the right capacity in the system nearby to handle the proposed building. And then the engineer and the project team have been working to design something that'll meet the rate control for any runoff. So they're good there. That condition is met. Regarding landscaping, fences, trees, walls, they've met any zoning codes, zoning requirements as far as landscaping, and also forestry, like Anton mentioned within the front there, those larger trees. That finding is met. Finding number 10 is met. The site plan meets the Americans with Disabilities Act, as well as Minnesota State Accessibility Code, I believe it's called. So all is well there. And then finding number 11 is also met, and that is that the plans submitted meet or exceeds, specifications for erosion control and sediment control during the construction phase. And they did turn in those plans, and they were consistent with other best management practices currently used by Minnesota Pollution Control and their stormwater manual. So that condition is met. So in the end, I would recommend this approval of the site plan for the new 5-story multifamily development with the structured parking with the following conditions. One, that sign off by site plan review staff for technical compliance of the site plan and supporting documentation, including the traffic memo. So like kind of I mentioned with the alley, what that's about is making sure that anything, little loose ends are tied up by the normal crew that's reviewing them, and that we get all the things signed off so that they look right on the building permit when that goes in. Number 2, approval of the conditional use permit for the building height. And in the case that wouldn't be approved, we would ask the team to resubmit a site plan that meets the maximum allowed height. Condition number 3 is that approval of the variances front, rear, and the side yard setbacks, or resubmittal of a site plan that meets allowed setbacks. And the 4th condition of approval would be to make sure that the project team is able to comply with the code that allows a higher floor area ratio when there are specific low-income units provided, and it's some paperwork that would need to be filed on the back end. And we put that on there as a condition, just kind of as a reminder that we can make sure that follows after the building permits start rolling in that. And yeah, that is all I have. Thank you, Chair Riley and committee members. And let me know if you have any questions or like questions about site plan process or norms as well, because I think you guys saw me last year at New Year's as well for a site plan, so it's not a real common one.
Thank you. Ashley, this is Chair Riley again. Is there anyone on the committee that has any questions for Ms. Carter, Mr. Jervy? I do, but I want to let other members of the committee ask before I ask mine.
And I do believe our applicant has folks here as well. Oh, thank you. Sorry. Chair Riley, I forgot to add something. Can I add something?
Please do, and then I'll take Commissioner Sate.
Thank you, thank you. I forgot to note that I received 2 letters in opposition of the site plan. Similar reasons to what Anton had mentioned, concerns about size, parking. One note about, well, 60% AMI, but is that real Mac Groveland AMI or, that kind of question. And then Mac Grove Community Council did send in a letter of support for the Mccubbin variance specifically for that file, but they didn't send in a separate letter in support of the site plan file, which may not have dawned on them when writing that it's 2 separate files. So that is all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Commissioner Sate, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just one question. I don't know who was going to answer, but on the beginning was a 91 unit, and then now is 114 units. What is the reason that? Just need to see that. Why?
Yeah. I can give a stab at it, and the applicants might have more as well. I know two main things that happened was one was the zoning code changed a bit, which made them kind of think of a revision, but the other was that in their original plan, they didn't include half of the alley in their measurement of the whole site. There is a part in our zoning code in a different section where it says if you have an alley, you can use half of the alley when you're calculating your floor area ratio. So what they realized when they added half the alley is that they had designed it smaller than it could be. So they redrew for that. Feel free to add on, Anton, if I could have said that better. Okay, cool.
Commissioner Sate, does that answer your question? Because I have a follow-up question, then I'll take Commissioner Hood's question. Commissioner Sate?
No, that it does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned that the zoning code change, was that the parking change? I'm curious what the zoning code change is that resulted in the revision.
Given that they started earlier in 2020, I think they hit both the parking code and the RM2 study that Bill did. Is that right, friends at PED? Am I remembering?
Through the chair, I don't know the timing of the RM2. Is definitely parking. RM2 would have been pretty close though.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Hood, and then Commissioner Tagioff.
Thank you, Chair Riley. So just a question for staff. So to confirm, they allow, for your FAR calculation, you can calculate into the alleyway. Is this an error from the old code? What is the intention of this? Because that seems, if the alleyway is used as a public right-of-way, it seems odd that that would be permitted. So have they found simply like a loophole? Is that what we're dealing with here?
No, I guess I'd say it's something that St. Paul does and always had did. And I think, you know, as you're saying, oh, this is kind of weird, I think they assumed we didn't have that when they drew it.
Sure.
But the
That's a
including half
reasonable
the
assumption,
alley
isn't it?
is,
Yeah.
it's one of those small St. Paul things that we have, that's still in the code. And, you know, it makes sense that when you put pen to paper, you wouldn't necessarily expect it to be there. So I think that was maybe part of version 1.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for that clarification. It's always good to see that St. Paul has its weird quirks. So thank you.
Chair, if I may, I wanted to just clarify on the RM2 zoning study point. The RM2 zoning study was completed at the time of the original application back in March here. I remember it being discussed at the original committee meeting, and in fact, the RM2 zoning changes kind of made this development viable and possible, whereas previously the applicant may have not contemplated such a development.
Thank you, Commissioner Tagioff. The only question I have remaining then is I think so far anyway, is the rationale for the additional 4 feet 2 inches of height. Do we have a reason for that? Is there an element of the building that's being accommodated in those extra 4 feet? Is it the fact that the first floor is no longer sunken? That's just not clear to me in the application.
Good evening. This is from the architecture office. I don't know, when are we supposed to?
If staff can't answer it, I'm going to call on you guys next.
Okay,
So,
I'm sorry. Then I'll wait.
No, that's all right. Thank you very much.
I would
Are
recommend
you both
opening the
deferring to the
floor
applicant?
to Ellie. and-
Thank you. All right, great.
Thank you.
Any other members of the committee have any questions for staff? No. Okay, great. If the applicant or applicant's representatives would like to add to the information that we heard from staff, that would be great. Just be sure to state your name and address for the record. And I'm starting with you, Mr. Lubinow.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Good. Yeah, this is Rob Lubinow with Yellow Tree. I'm at Washington Avenue, North Minneapolis. Our office is at 1834 East 38th Street. Thanks again for your time. Our partner Chad has done a great job on this project. He's unlikely to join. He also welcomed a baby just yesterday. But you may remember from the last planning commission, he has done an amazing job engaging stakeholders, working with the city, receiving full neighborhood support twice. And we're happy as Yellow Tree to be a part of this project, that our affordability focus and help make this project a reality. So Yellow Tree, just briefly, is an intentional entry point housing developer. We don't set out to exclusively build high-end luxury, and we do not seek any subsidies or government money for low-income housing. This is the largest segment of renters, and housing is not being built for them. So in addition to the 10% income restricted affordable units that we're providing, we just naturally are providing housing options that start at 60% AMI, and the vast majority of our units are affordable to 80% AMI. This is inherent to all Yellow Tree projects. It's what we choose to develop and are passionate about, and it's now another enhancement to this project. So this intent, it's very well received by our tenants. Our buildings are over 99% occupied, which is largely unheard of in our economic conditions, and it's another factor in addition to focusing on, like staff mentioned, with the energy modeling, sustainability initiatives, water retention, et cetera. This is a very tough site, tough conditions that are inherent to the site. I think you noted them. We may have 6, potentially 7 doors, and I don't know if any of them exit the building at the same elevation. It's probably one of the most difficult we've worked on. but it's in a great location. The city has identified this area for the additional density. It has great walkability, especially the connection to grocery should not be overlooked. Maybe before turning it over to DJR, I heard you, and if there is any talk or allegations that are irrelevant to these entitlements, I'd like to reserve the right to address those. And also, if anyone would like to meet at another time, I'm more than willing and actually a proponent of trying to address these issues. Yellow Tree is a leader in merit-based contracting. And as far as I know, one of the few companies that's proactively working for workers' right. I'm a little hurt and I guess sorry about that, but with that, I'm willing to turn it over to DJR for further explanation.
Thanks, Rob. Good evening. This is Eliz Mira from DJR Architecture. I can open the camera as well, just to show off a little bit of this. Just to answer what Rob already started, Chet being, with his wife and baby right now, super excited to work with Yellow Tree, a local developer and construction company in our town that is very successful. He needed the help because this site presents some major difficulties, specifically with today's construction costs. And to answer what also Rob just presented, 7 doors, none of them. It's in the same elevation. You guys mentioned before there are the tremendous practical difficulties with this site. And I will try to back up a little and answer Commissioner your question in a little bit lengthy. The 4 feet addition are, we already touched on St. Paul's unique way to look at some zoning issues. We'll touch on one of them a little later, a couple of them, the balconies, and then the setbacks being calculated through the average height of a building, which is leading us to really request for bigger variances. But I'll walk you through it. As for the 4 feet, the building did not change. It's 5 stories. It's 4.5 stories, 4 full stories, and 1 penthouse kind of step back story. Altogether 5 stories, which is allowed by RM2. The extra 4 feet are because we, in the revised design, decided to elevate our 100 level, our 00, our entrance to the building, to the grade, which means that at that point, no lobby area or unit area is going to be sunk underground. So that's a benefit to the building. The building's going to, be better because of that. That is an additional 2 feet and 6 inches. 1'4" and another 1'2" we added to our first level, to the lobby. So the lobby is going to be a little bit taller, and the top floor is going to be a little bit taller too. I want to share the screen. So these are together, these are the 4 feet that you were mentioning. However, one thing I didn't mention is that our average height dropped by, I am trying to read, where is that? Our average height dropped 1'4" from before because of the footprint. And so with this, at this point, I would like to share my screen and just walk you through the whole revised new project. Anybody, just if you can just confirm that you see my screen.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. So first of all, maybe to start with this little comparison side by side. I think that with no too many words, you can see that the approved building, a building that we can literally go and ask for permit right now, is here on the left. It's a little bit not finished rendering, as we were in the process of designing. And the building to the right is a finished rendering. You can see that basically the changes are very, very minimal. The 4 feet extra, that 2 feet 6 out of them is due to the new average height, and 2 feet, and the rest of it, I'm sorry, is due to the additions to the floors. What changed here is the additional garage level that you can see here that is popping out, and this is extending to the same line as this wall is. And I'll walk you through. But the overall building is pretty much the same. You can see that the effect of it on the environment, the effect of it on the surroundings is absolutely the same. I will now try to walk you through the changes. As the planner, which I commend you for the quick studying that you did from Mike Richardson to you, Mr. Anton. It's outstanding how you picked up every little detail. So thank you for that. And then Ashley as well noted that I think that we can spend some time on why did we calculate the FAR wrong, but it's a fact that the true calculation, the right calculation of the FAR is what we are showing here, and that is the current iteration of, which includes this blue area, which grew our FAR calculation from 71,000 square feet to 83,000 square feet and change. In when we are dealing with affordable housing unit, we want to take advantage of these square footages. I think that Rob can speak to why the additional so many units, and that I think that that's because to make the building more marketable to more people in St. Paul. By the way, one thing I did not mention is my address is 1675 Ford Parkway in St. Paul and Highland Park, which is, this building is literally my backyard. I drive my kids there every single day, if not twice, to soccer practices and so forth. Chet, as one of the developers, lives on Lincoln Avenue, which is, again, this building is really our backyard. We care about it really, really so much. As for this comparison, as you can see with the additional FAR, that led us to redesign the footprint of the building to take advantage of the additional square footage. As you can see, the previous footprint is marked on orange, the top floor here, and the rest of the 4 stories are here. So as you can see, what the additional part is in gray. One very, very important thing to mention is that we are not crossing the approved setbacks from the last version. We contained our building within that. As you can see on the different sides, we have what was allowed, previously entitled 10 feet setbacks. The new required setbacks is 18 feet 11. We are still proposing the same thing that we were entitled before. Same with all the sides. And this is a very, very important thing about St. Paul. St. Paul calculate setbacks according to, and I think that planner Mr. Anton touched on it. The calculation of the setbacks is according to the average height of the building, which in this case, the average height, because we enlarged our footprint, and this is the lower side of the slope. This is this corner, and this area is the lowest part of the slope. That lowered our average height by 1 foot and 6 inches. If I'm not mistaken, I can go back to that slide later. or I can show that later in a different elevation. That means that really what we are asking here is to respect the same setbacks that we had before. The only thing that changed is a mathematical equation that is set by the zoning code of St. Paul. We are now we're now adding a little bit to the variance that we're asking, but the setback in de facto is not changing. The building respects the same setbacks as before. We are staying the same thing with the exception of another little thing in the city of St. Paul, which is the balconies. From some reason, for multifamily housing, the balconies are calculated within the setbacks. If you look at single family homes, it's okay. You have a setback and then you can have built porches and built balconies. That would be okay. But in single family, in multifamily, it's not. So that is the reason why we are asking for an enlarged setback on both our west facing and south facing, and that's due to the balconies. And you saw that the condition to approval is that the setback to the building will not going to change. We're respecting the same one as before. The only thing that is changing is the setback to the balconies. So really, I just want to iterate once again. What happened here is that we found that we have more square footage to take care to build. That'll give us more units, more market rate units, and more affordable units. Therefore, we took advantage of that. We are respecting the same setbacks, but because of these setbacks, because of the new footprint, our average height change and the calculation of the number that we are asking for variance changed. That is all. That's all we're asking. With that, we can again look at the side-by-side comparison and see we have 5 stories. It's the same 5 stories. The 4 feet difference in height, which I explained before, 1 foot in just rounding up or rounding down the numbers. 1 foot goes to the top floor. 1 foot floor goes to elevate the building to the 100 to meet grade, and another 2 feet because of the average height that got lower. Our FAR grew. Our number of units grew. We have now we had before 9 units at 60% MAI. We have 11 right now. Previously, we were required 95 spots. We gave 88. Now we're not required at all, and we give 0. And we give 82. Sorry. Bike stalls. You can see in our traffic study that that was done by the traffic engineer, we are well above and beyond everything that is required in terms of traffic movement, parking in and out from the site. We are meeting everything. Setbacks, and I'm talking about the actual setbacks, which is what's really important to remember. We are respecting the same setbacks as before, same setbacks that were approved, with the exception of the balconies on the new. Ashley touched a little bit about what did we do with the new height, and that's so we added 4 feet, but we stepped back the building even more than we did before. We stepped it back not to interrupt the sun path into the single family homes across the street from us. This slide also leads me to, once again, to show you really, once again, there is no difference in the overall massing of the building. And the step back that we did for the building is to allow the sun, so there is no difference in the impact that the building has on the surrounding. One thing that I want to touch on a little bit more, and that it relates to the findings that we proved and found, and I read some of the comments from the letters that were given, and a lot of people argue that we don't have the practical difficulty. So in that, I just really want to show the true elevation of that building. RM2 zoning district allow for 50-foot height, 5 stories and 50 foot in height. If this site was just a regular site, and this and our grade would have been just here. Oh, my bad. Sorry. I'm trying to draw a line right where my cursor is right now at the 0, 0. My building would have been 55 foot high, and my only conditional use permit, I would ask for 5 foot extra. But this elevation shows you a section through the street, through James Avenue, that shows the huge drop from the west side of James to the east side of James, which drops my average height by 14 feet from grade. That defines my new average height. That is a true practical difficulty. If I have to build a handicap ramp that mitigate that slope, it's impossible. It would have to be 100 feet in length. Another.
Mr. Mayor, this is Chair Riley again. I'm gonna ask you to take the next minute to wrap up.
I am wrapping up. I'm wrapped
Thank
up.
you.
I'm wrapped up. I'm all good. I just wanted to show one more elevation that shows this extreme slopes that, you know, it really is a practical difficulty, and one more image that shows our shade study. And I was going to wrap up again by showing that really this we're getting a
And just
way.
yeah, and just maybe to specifically answer the commission member's question, you know, how do we get from 91 to 114? Just quick math, you know, 9 to 10 units was because we discovered that we mistakenly had an issue with the FAR and we designed a building that was smaller than what was allowed. The remaining 12 to 15 units have to do with affordability. So that's, you know, making the units that are affordable to a larger segment. And those additional 12 units make the entire 113, 114 units affordable. So, or more easily affordable by a larger segment. So it is both. So we're allowed the FAR, but what we do with that FAR is difficult. So, you know, it's not like we're getting, you know, 20 units, 23 units larger. It's both the affordability component and the discovery of the FAR.
I got
Great.
one last point. I'm sorry, because
last
point. I promise, because Rob's partner is going to be mad at me if I don't say that our support in the community, in the district council, grew to almost maximum, to 12 to 2. By that, this is it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It looks like Commissioner Rangel Morales, you have a question for the applicant or for staff or for me. Go ahead.
Well, thank you for that, Chair. And the question is from Mr. Lubnow, well, I have two questions. The first question is for Mr. Lubnow. I'm just wondering if in the reconfiguration of, the space, whether what is the size relationship between the affordable units versus the units that are more market rate, even if they're at 80% AMI? In other words, what is the price per square foot for an affordable unit versus what is the price per square? It's more of a question. But let me finish. So why I'm asking it is I think it's important for us to understand in the Planning Commission, not just that something is being termed affordable, but also what it actually means and what is being built around the city. So number one, I applaud you for taking advantage of that RM incentive to build bigger and build affordability into your project. That's amazing, and it's great that you're taking advantage of it. So that's the question for Mr. Lubno, and then for I guess Mr. Smira, actually in speaking, sort of, I don't think he intended to do this, but he sort of went against the reasoning that the city provided for why this is a practical difficulty. So when I read the comment from the city, it was that the slope was the practical difficulty. And I think what Mr. Smiro just pointed out was that if this was at grade level, you would still need a conditional use permit for the additional 5 feet. For it would be 5 feet, but you would need to meet the practical difficulty for that 5 feet in general. So whether it's 5 feet or 14 feet, if we're not taking the slope into account, and this was grade level, it sort of made me question a little bit of the city's rationale in it. So I'll let Mr. Smiro refer to that one, but Mr. Lubnow, if you could comment on the first part.
Right, that's a difficult question. You know, for a few of the points that you just pointed out, it's the reason why we're not just a standard, you know, high-end luxury developer, where it is our partnership with the design team to identify the type of units that we want. So it's not like we want this many 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, let's get 260 a square foot and we'll be happy. You know, it literally is, rather than designing a space and pricing the unit, we decide what the pricing that we want for that unit, and we design it. So it's literally just changing that. So not to give away our secret sauce, but we go at it that we know what we want for our rent points, what type of housing we want to provide, and then get it done extremely efficiently and without sacrificing, you know, the user experience. So we still have great amenities, finishes, etc. But we don't look at it by square foot. We look at it by the type of housing we want to provide, and then we design to it.
If I could just follow up and be a little more specific, will some of the units that you're proposing in your secret sauce or whatever it is be other than micro units in the affordability component?
It's how do you define micro? So regardless of how you define it, the answer
to 425, I think is how it's being defined as micro by other developers that have come through. Again, it's not to criticize you. It's more about just understanding what is being built and being forthright about what is forthcoming or what's coming to the city.
Right.
Again, I think we need every range from 350 square units to 3-bedroom units. So I'm just trying to understand what the project is.
Right. It's so to define that, if it is 425, I would say there's very few, maybe one stack of units that are below 425. But we have alcove 1-bedroom units that are probably, you know, in the 500s to 600 square feet. That still meet, you know, that would be close to 60% AMI, certainly less than 80% AMI without a doubt. But again, it's efficiency. It all comes back to how you design it. So you can have a 800 square foot space feel like 400 square feet if it's not designed properly. So it's how you design space, 100%, what you use and how you use it.
Well, thank you for answering that. And then Mr. Smiro, if you could comment on the part about the.
Absolutely. It's actually Rob's last comment. It's how you design space. And so the practical difficulty is there. It is a fact in the site. The slope exists. It doesn't change. What I said was just an example of what the building would have been if this site was flat. I might have designed a different building. I might have designed a different configuration of a building. Every site calls for a different design. So I understand why you question why you asked your question, but the reason does not change the fact of what happens in the site. The slope of over 24 feet, actually, I think the planner, Mr. Anton, had the correct number. I don't want to go to a wrong slide right now and find it, maybe 25 feet. It's a huge slope to overcome, and nobody wants to live in a floor where you have a parking ramp. Nobody wants to live in a basement. So those 2 floors, and that's the reason why I showed these 2 images, is to show that Our lobby really wants to be on grade. Your parking really wants to be below grade, but below grade here becomes 25 feet above ground, which is how I walked before about how in the city of St. Paul, the calculation is from the average height. And I don't want the commissioner to get mad at me. So I don't want to, if I answered, if I didn't answer your question, please let me know and I'll try to think about a better way to answer it.
You can't design that way. I mean, you can't split your building systems. It's concrete on the first two levels
So,
above.
Yeah, hang on just a second, folks. Commissioner Rangel Morales, I'm assuming you didn't get the answer you were looking for to your second question.
Yeah, no, I didn't.
And
If
I
you
think
can
that
try to clarify it, I think maybe if you understood it.
I think perhaps staff might have the better answer. And I believe it's related to the height being calculated from an average grade versus at grade. And perhaps Mr. Jervy can effectively explain that to us. I would, but that's not my job right now.
Yeah, I think that has something to do with it. The other thing I just want to point out too is that there is no finding for the conditional use permit doesn't have a practical difficulties finding. That's just for the variances. So if we're talking about practical difficulties, that relates to the variances. But for a conditional use permit, you don't have to make a practical difficulty findings. You just have to meet the findings for conditional use permit.
Thank you, Mr. Jervy. Yeah, I think there's two different things at play here. There's the issue of the grade and the way height is measured when we're on a grade, and then the fact that if this building was on a flat surface, it would still need a conditional use permit for additional height. And I think if yes,
Sure.
go ahead, Mr.
I would say too that given the setbacks, it may not actually need even for that extra 5 feet, it may not need a conditional use permit because if you set back from the sides and rear. Getting into the weeds and a theoretical here, but just for educational purposes, just want to throw that out there. I'm done.
Commissioner Rangel Morales, are you moderately satisfied?
Yeah, I would just I like the project. I was just when I was reading the staff report and going through the variances, which to me are naturally tied to the height, the practical difficulty that was referenced in the variances was sort of this slope. And so I was a little taken aback that it was sort of refuted, I guess, by the applicant that if it, but in any event, I'll defer and move to, I see other commissioners have questions and defer to them.
Thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner Tagaff. I saw you first, and then Commissioner Grill.
Thank you, Chair. So I wanted to I think it's a very helpful comparison to sort of consider the building that was presented to us in March versus the building that is before us now. I note that we've gone from 91 to 114 units. I note also that we've gone from, I believe, 9 affordable units to 11 affordable units. Obviously, with the increase in total unit count, significantly, you have a situation now where obviously the fixed costs of the project are being spread across more units. So my question to potentially the applicant now is, the affordable units within this structure, obviously there's 2 more of them, but can you point to differences in quality, amenities, or size in the affordable units that have been permitted by this, significant increase in unit count between what they would have been then and what they would be now? Thank you.
You're mute, Rob, and I assumed you want to answer that.
Sure. Yeah, there is no differences in our units versus the neighboring unit next to it as far as the quality of the finishes. There's still going to be great long-lasting cabinets with appliances, HVAC heating system. It does need to be an aggregate or an average across our unit types. So those affordable, they're not going to be, they're not all going to be looking at a dumpster on the second level in the worst unit. It does need to be a mix. And I would leave that to our property management as how those identified, and if they switch depending on when we have availabilities and if how people move out and move ins. But that's that's something that we have to provide, and we will provide it without a doubt. And it's not going to be any different than any other housing, with the exception of 3 units on the top level that we're trying to capture additional rent, to support the other units.
Thank you, Mr. Lubina. And I'll remind the commission to ask questions related specifically to the conditional use permit, site plan, or variances. And Commissioner Grill.
This is Commissioner Grill. I put my hand down. I was just being cognizant of the time and the fact that I was seeing folks drop off the call that I'm assuming were maybe here to comment. So just knowing that we're ticking into we're over the second hour, that I was seeing folks drop off there. Nothing else besides that, Chair.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Grill. I've been keeping an eye on the clock myself. And so with that, I think we'll open the public hearing to take testimony specifically regarding the site plan, the conditional use permit, and the variances that are being presented today. We will not take testimony on anything that doesn't address the zoning aspects of this particular case. And I see Mr. Morales has his hand up first, and I believe that he represents 2 people.
Yep. My name is Diego Morales. I'm a resident in Coon Rapids, Minnesota, off of Hanson. I'm here to basically translate for Angel Polivio. I'll let him introduce himself. He's got a statement to make there. He is a constituent of St. Paul, so I'll let him speak first. Angel, ahora sigue esto.
And Mr. Morales, if you could remind him to state his name and address as well. Thank you.
Yep. Tu nombre y tu dirección, Ángel.
Mi nombre es Ángel Polivio Merino y vivo en el 810 Hasher, St. Paul, Minnesota. Mi pregunta es, escuché decir que usted ayuda a los trabajadores y me gustaría saber por qué nosotros como trabajadores que trabajamos en este proyecto no nos han pagado aún todo el dinero que nos tenían que pagar.
My name is Angel Polivio Moreno. I live off of 830 Catch Street in St. Paul. My question's in regards to the project. Rob mentioned that they are worker rights advocates and they want everything for the workers. Why is it that you guys aren't helping workers on a current project that you currently have a development going, and you're not doing anything to help us in regards to this project? Y Ángel, ¿querías decir si estás con o contra el proyecto?
¿Perdón?
Si estás a favor o contra el proyecto.
Pues me gustaría en contra del proyecto porque pues no nos han pagado y hace mucho tiempo que no nos han pagado.
And I asked him if he was in favor or against the project. He mentioned he is against the project. They've been dealing with non-payment issue already for quite some time, over almost close to a year timeline. ¿Algo más que quisieras decir, Polivio?
Somos 15 trabajadores que pues no nos pagaron eso y hace como 6 meses que ninguna organización, ninguna compañía se ha querido hacer cargo de este dinero que nos tienen que pagar a nosotros.
And I just want to let it be known that it's 15 of us workers and it's been over 6 months, and Yellow Tree hasn't done a single thing to try and help us resolve this issue.
Sí, en estas compañías estaba la Just Framing y la Strong Framing, y pues Yellow Tree que está a la cabeza de todos ellos.
We just want to let you know that it was Yellow Tree Construction under U.S. Framing underneath Strong Framing for their project in St. Paul off of University.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Morales and Mr. Marino. We really appreciate your time today, and we're going to move on to the next person.
Thank you. Gracias por
Ms. Nelson.
Chair Riley and committee members, my name is Kim Nelson. I'm here on behalf of the 28,000 workers of the North Central States Regional Council of Carpenters. Our headquarters are at 700 Olive Street in St. Paul. We represent many workers who live and work in St. Paul. We encourage the committee to reject the application for a conditional use permit and setback variances for the James Avenue apartments. This development has as proposed would be detrimental to the existing character of the neighborhood and could impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of the surrounding property. It would also endanger the public health, safety, and general welfare. In regards to the latter, the project developer is teaming up with Yellow Tree Development per a December 14th article in Finance and Commerce. Yellow Tree will also serve as the general contractor for this project. Yellow Tree's track record of controlling construction budgets and managing construction projects has resulted in safety citations, large amount of wage theft, and the exploitation of immigrant workers on numerous projects. We sent written testimony outlining this along with photos. We ask that you review it. Should you not have it in hand, we are happy to send it again. The photos were reported to MnOSHA, who promptly investigated potential violations. MnOSHA independently investigated and issued 7 citations on Yellow Tree projects, primarily for safety, serious safety infractions involving fall hazards. Yellow Tree's projects have been cited for numerous safety violations, calling into question the impact of the proposed project on public safety and health in the community. Since January 2020, their projects in Minneapolis-St. Paul have produced 26 OSHA complaints and 7 citations for serious safety infractions, including not building safety railings on the roof at Pastor Apartments in St. Paul, and not providing workers with proper fall arrest protection equipment at several sites. Yellow Tree's history of OSHA citations, especially when combined with a project that is applying for a conditional use permit to build a taller building and setback variances to allow the building to come right to the property line, presents a very real threat to the immediate neighborhood and will endanger the public health, safety, and general welfare, and should be grounds to reject their application for conditional use permit and setback variances. If the commission does approve this application, we request that an additional condition be placed on the CUP. Workers on Yellow Tree's Pastor Apartments right here in St. Paul have provided statements that they are being paid by personal check with no withholdings at all. Since workers paid off the books in this manner are rarely provided with workers' compensation coverage, unemployment and overtime pay, and other benefits, we question whether subcontractors are in compliance with St. Paul's Earned Sick and Save Time ordinance. Thus, we request the project's general contractor and all subcontractors on the site be required to submit to an audit by the city's Human Rights and Equal Economic Opportunity Department to ensure compliance with St. Paul Earned Sick and Save Time ordinance. Thank you for your consideration of these comments.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Appreciate your time and your comments. We did receive your written testimony, and if anyone else is going to address the concerns raised by Ms. Nelson or others at the hearing right now, I'm going to ask you to not testify. We have accepted the hearing commentary on that matter at this time, and I want to only hear from folks who are concerned about the zoning application at in front of us, which is for a conditional use permit, a site plan, and several variances related to setbacks. Mr. Pranis, what do you intend to?
Just on the question of the setbacks.
Okay, thank you. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Chair and Commission. My name is Kevin Pranis, and I'm a St. Paul resident. I live at 1469 Van Buren Avenue. I'm very familiar with the site. My children actually both went to school at Adams Spanish Immersion right across 35. So know the neighborhood pretty well. Definitely in favor of density and affordable housing in St. Paul while trying to preserve the sort of character. And I think in this case, I don't think the applicant has made the convincing case that those setbacks serve a necessary purpose for this project or serve a sufficient public purpose, that there's enough public benefit to justify the variance. My understanding is that the way these variances work, it's up to the applicant has the burden of showing that the variances are needed. And as far as I can tell, it's simply an economic question to get all of the variances. And so I would like to speak against the variances, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Makarios, and I might remind you that you need to restrict your commentary to the conditional use permit, the variances, and the site plan. Thank you.
Of course, Chair Riley. It's nice to see you and commission members. Thank you for your service to St. Paul. I trust that you have my written comments before you. I will not go through them in detail, but I have a couple of points I'd like to highlight, I think, from those comments related to the conditional use permit and the setback variances. The first is that the applicant, throughout their application and even when talking today, makes this seem like, hey, you all already approved this project. All we need here is 4 more feet and the balcony sticking over into the setback. And that is just not the case. In fact, the project that was approved and the conditional use permit and variances that were approved by the Planning Commission in March specifically say that those approvals are contingent on final plans being approved that are in substantial compliance with what was already applied for, right? So those setbacks and that conditional use permit was for a 91 unit building and does not apply to any current proposal or any further proposal. And so when they use the term previously entitled, it does not apply to a 114 unit apartment building. That is purely for a proposal that they made, a year ago. So they don't just need 4 feet of height and balcony sticking in. What they need is really significant setbacks on all 4 sides of the building and a conditional use permit. The best example of this is on the south side of the building. And I included in my written comments the graphs, and we saw, I think, these graphs both from Mr. Jervey and from the applicant. But on the south side, in the previous proposal, they really only needed a variance for a portion of the building. The westernmost portion is the only part of the building that crossed the threshold into the setback that they needed a variance for. Well, now that they've figured out that they can maximize, that they can use a quirk of St. Paul code to increase their floor area ratio or increase the calculation of floor area ratio, and that they don't need to provide parking, which I support getting rid of parking minimums. They have simply made a decision to max out this building and bring the entire building right down to that kind of quote unquote previously entitled line, so that they could add 23 more units to this project. Adding 23 more units to a project is not to overcome a practical difficulty. Yeah, the site has a practical difficulty. It's on a hill. There's definitely a slope, but the fact, but you don't need to add 114 units in order to overcome a practical difficulty to go to a 4.5 foot setback when an 18 foot 11 inch setback is required. That is an unreasonable unreasonable justification for such a dramatic variance and setback, and it is for purely economic reasons. That's the only reason they need to go 4.5 feet from the property line on the south is for economic reasons. And I think it's similar on the north. And yeah, I actually think the east setback is more reasonable if they were going to actually have a proper setback on the west side, which brings me to finding number 3 in the staff report, which is something I want to highlight. The applicant applied for a front yard setback. A 25-foot setback is required. The applicant applied for 13 foot 9 inches. The staff rationale that was used here, I think, is totally wrong on point 3. The rationale that was used in the staff report is from a part of the code that says that buildings shouldn't have to be set back further than their surrounding buildings if the setback requirement would require that. In this situation, there's only one principal building on the entire block that exists, and that is the 2-story small mixed commercial and residential building on the corner of Lexington and Randolph. Right, it's right up onto the property line. It has a 0 setback. It is a small 2-story building with commercial use on the first floor. That is not at all similar to a 114 unit apartment building that's 70 feet tall. And using the one existing principal structure that's right on the sidewalk to justify not needing any setback for a 114 unit apartment building is not at all reasonable. It is not what that provision of the code is for. If this project needs a setback variance for the front yard, and they don't qualify for it because the only reason they're building a project this big is so they can fit all 114 units on, and that's an economic consideration, not to get around the problems of the slope. My third point is on the CUP overall. Look, we need higher density in this city. There's no question about it. We need more housing affordability. I'm a proponent for FAR bonuses. I like getting rid of parking minimums. I like all this stuff, but this building simply doesn't fit on this site. With you can take advantage of the maximum FAR, but you also have to live within the height and the setback requirements in the code. And I think it would be reasonable to grant this conditional use permit for height if the variances weren't so big. But the fact that they've increased the mass of this building so significantly makes the variances more needed, not less needed. We've got the entire south wall now coming all the way to, within 10 feet of the property line, 4.5 feet of the property line in some areas with the balconies. And I think it is unreasonable and clearly only for economic reasons that they're asking for those variances. Last point I want to make is, yeah, St. Paul's code is quirky. There are a few quirks in it. I understand that. That is not a reason to grant the variance, the fact that St. Paul's code is different than this code in other cities. But this developer benefited from the quirk in the St. Paul code that allows them to calculate their FAR based on half of the alley, but then they complain that they have to use the quirky code to calculate the height of the building, and they complain that balconies count against the setback. Well, that's the code, right? Balconies count against the setback. You don't do the setback to the building, you do the setback to the edge of the structure, and that's the balcony. And so I think it is unreasonable to grant such dramatic variances for a project when they could very easily fit a project within the bounds of the code. The reason they're not is for economic considerations. It is not due to the plight of the landowner. And with that, Mr. Chair, Chair Riley, Commission members, I'm happy to shut up unless you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Macarios. Any questions for the testifiers at this point? Do we have anybody else here to speak in opposition to this application? Anyone else speak in opposition? All right. Seeing none, is there anyone else to speak in favor? I apologize for going backwards, but I knew we had more people in opposition than we did in favor. Anyone else to speak in favor of this application? All right, last time anyone to speak on this application, set of applications, site plan, conditional use permit, and variances for 470 South Lexington Parkway, zoning file 21-327115 as sequential. Great. All right. Seeing none, is there a motion that a member of the committee would like to make? Or any lingering questions for staff? Commissioner Grill.
So this is Commissioner Grill. Can I first ask a clarifying question for you? Which order do you want the motions in? Do you want the site plan and then the cup and variances, or the other way around?
I think it might be best to do the cup and the variances first, because their approval or their whatever happens with them is impacts the site plan. So let's start there.
All right, this is Commissioner Grill. I'd like to make a motion to move the staff recommendation for 470 Lexington Parkway, the cup and the variances, in addition to the 4 additional conditions added by staff.
Thank you, Commissioner Grill. So we have a motion to for the recommend the staff approval for the conditional use permit and variances along with 4 conditions. Is there a second for that motion?
Commissioner Said, I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Said. All right, the motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Grill, is your hand just still up for making a motion?
It is.
Okay, great. Mr. Jervy.
Chair Riley, I just noticed in the chat, Sam Langer was asking if the public hearing is officially closed.
Thank you. Yes, I can't. The chat has disappeared for me, so I don't know why it's not working. I just can't. I can see it says meeting chat nothing happens. I've seen 2 chats come through, but I can't actually read them. So I'm sorry, Sam. Yeah. Public hearing is closed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Commissioner Tagioff?
Thank you, Chair. So I wanted to comment on this. I like the project. I also have to look at the requirement to apply the law in this case. And I struggle with the case being made that the variances particularly are necessary due to practical difficulties. And the heart of the struggle really is that we've seen a plan for a smaller building that would not require such great variances. And I understand that the site has a natural slope, and I understand that that it slopes in both directions, and that, you know, in theory really speaks more to the CUP for height than anything else. But it's I find myself having difficulty disputing the logic that we've already seen a 91 unit building that would have worked previously with much smaller variances required. So I'm struggling to overcome that you know, the necessary increase in overall massing and bulk is necessary from a purely legalistic perspective, despite liking the affordable units, despite liking the extra to affordable units. So I'm struggling there a little bit.
This is Chair Riley again. Thank you, Commissioner Tagioff. I share some of that struggle. One of the things that I'm struggling with regarding the variances is, you know, without the alley, the FAR is far exceeds sort of the scale and the massing of the neighborhood and of the zoning district itself. And I guess this leads me to a question for staff, for Mr. Jervy specifically. The maximum density for this part of the city, as suggested in the comprehensive plan, is 60 units per acre, and this far exceeds that. And I'm wondering at which point there's sort of a conflict between the comprehensive plan and the zoning code regarding units per acre versus FAR as your density determination. And I really wish I had thought to ask that question on Monday, and I'm sorry.
Chair Riley, you know, we have density requirements for, or not requirements, but ranges identified in the comp plan and land use chapter. Those are new for this round, but they also point out that it's an overall density for the broader category, and it's not on a project by project basis. And in a situation like this, where it's established neighborhood, if you look at a single family home, that's about 7 units an acre. And if you have blocks and blocks of 7 units an acre, having a building like this helps to bring up that overall volume. It's consistent with the locational aspects or locational policies for multifamily and higher density, given that it's on a two arterials and transit lines. But, you know, I guess I would have to look into more overall zoning, allowed densities, and the land use categories and the tables we've done to see what, you know, is there some recalibration that, you know, would make sense or what. But given that the site was so recently rezoned to RM2 and identified as consistent with the comp plan by the planning commission and city council, it seemed like a you know, a very recent review, and that it made sense in this location.
Thank you. Commissioner Rangel-Morales.
To Commissioner Tagioff's points, and maybe Anton can comment on it, but So first, I think, Chair, you also mentioned some hesitation about it. I think the applicant referenced a little bit that perhaps they got their FAR and the drafting, at least the last one that we approved, wrong. But you know, when we were drafting the RM2 changes, we specifically went to the FAR standard for determining how big someone can build. And so the whole purpose of that was to allow more density, which is what this project does. I think if if that changed between now and when they're going to start building, you know, I think it's totally I would have hoped that that's what we want to encourage, is for developers to use the new sort of the new guidelines on RM2 and the new regulations. With regards to the alley, I do know that at least in the Board of Zoning, it has come up a few times in which the alley is used to determine like the area ratio for how much can be covered by a unit or an accessory dwelling. So I wasn't surprised to hear it in this circumstance. So, and because I wasn't surprised by it, I don't think it was that. I mean, I know it has come up in other decisions. So I don't know, Anton, if you can comment on how the alleyway is used for other purposes in the zoning code. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I think it relates to how much of a yard can be covered by the dwelling and the accessory use, like the accessory dwellings. Is that correct?
Chair Riley, Commissioner Rangel Morales, I can't tell you off the top of my head every instance where it's used, but typically it's dealing with lot area where it can be considered as part of the overall lot area. And in cases where lot area is a factor, like FAR and lot coverage, then it can be considered.
Thank you, Mr. I was just going to say that.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, one of a recent case in which we used the alleys as part of the area was on you know, the duplex and triplex conversions that we've recently done. Those are included when we calculate the lot area for the size of the units per unit size. It's all over the zoning code. So let's see, Commissioner Rangel Morales, are you satisfied?
Yeah, I just
okay.
Yeah, I'll defer to others.
Commissioner Grill, did you want to come back or wait for Mr. Tagioff?
I'll wait for Mr. Tagioff. I think I'm just trying to be cognizant of time a little bit too. That's all.
Okay. Go ahead, Commissioner Tagioff.
Sure. Just to come in on the back of Commissioner Rangel Morales' comments, absolutely the FAR was recently considered in the RM2 zoning study, and the way that study was constructed, it was, yes, there's a maximum of FAR now of 2.75 boosted by 0.5 if you include affordability, but equally the dimensional standards, the setbacks, and that relationship between sort of additional height and RM2 requiring additional setbacks, those are all provisions of the zoning code with which developers have to live as well, and are designed to, you know, quite consciously, having spent a lot of time with this particular study, quite consciously to sort of say that, yes, there are lots in the city where it will be impractical to hit the maximum FAR. And that seems very much part of the PED's contemplation when the study was designed. The idea seems to be that on smaller lots, you're limited by setbacks, and on larger lots, you're limited by FAR. So if you have a big greenfield RM2 site, then you can hit FAR more comfortably, and it will typically be a large development than more of an infill site. And so my previous comments were really around, you know, we have these standards. It's been very, very recently studied, and if we're looking to depart from those standards in aggregate, then there must be a practical difficulty, and I'm not seeing it. And I also refer back to the original staff report written in March, which drew the same conclusion that the applicant hadn't established a practical difficulty. We obviously chose to overrule that as a zoning committee, but the staff finding has also changed between now and then.
Commissioner Grill. And then in the interest of time, I do want to let everybody know that we have time to lay this over if someone would like to do that, but we need to vote on the motion at hand. But Commissioner Grill, go ahead.
Nope, I'll reserve my comments if we're going to a vote.
Let's vote on what's in front of us since it's been moved and seconded. And we're entering our 6th half hour. So Sam, would you do the roll call?
Commissioner Hood,
No.
Commissioner Said, Commissioner Said,
Yes.
Commissioner Tegia,
No.
Commissioner Grill,
This is Commissioner Grill, yes.
Commissioner Rangel Morales,
No.
and Chair Riley.
No.
4 opposed. Motion failed.
Go ahead, Commissioner Grill. This is Chair Riley again.
This is Commissioner Grill. I might be wrong about this, but since Peter isn't here, I think do we need everyone on the record for the reasons why they stayed against it, the findings?
Yes, I think we do.
Correct. So, Chair, would you mind calling on the no's and we can articulate the reasons?
Yes, let's start with Commissioner Hood.
Thank you, Chair Riley. I'm reviewing specific language to make it obviously legally binding, but I just feel on the item that it doesn't meet what it needs to meet. So I'll pass and let other people comment, and then I'll piggyback off that while I quickly draft up a succinct comment on that. Thank you.
Commissioner Grill, do you want to go next? Oh no, you're a yes. Commissioner Rangel Morales.
I think I'll defer to Commissioner Taggioff, who articulated it pretty well. I can. I mean, it has to do with the variances and the practical difficulty on them. Commissioner Taggioff, would you like to state the language, or would you like me to try to?
I can certainly try, and please feel free to supplement. How about that?
Go ahead.
Sure. So my reasons for denial will be based on the zoning code. I believe it's 61.601 if I'm right. But anyway, subsection C and D referenced in the report for the variances. So that is that the applicant has not established that there are practical difficulties in complying with the provision, and that the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances that were unique to property not created by the landowner. So C and D. I feel specifically that the slope of the property is certainly a factor, but the applicant has not sufficiently demonstrated why the slope dictates building footprint of that size and height of that size necessarily. Yeah, so that's my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Taggioff. Commissioner Rangel Morales.
So I'll join on Commissioner Taggioff's comments. In addition, I'll add with respect to the rear yard setback, the side yard setbacks, and both side yard setbacks. I think the applicant contradicted the staff recommendation. I think Mr. Jervy sort of commented on he thinks that it would meet the requirements either way, and I just feel like we should have a little more concrete language than that. If it really is a practical difficulty, at least the way I understood it, I can't get to that that it is a practical difficulty essentially. And because for what Commissioner Taggioff commented is if they've shown us a project that can fit within this site, that doesn't require that.
Thank you, Commissioner Rangel Morales. And Commissioner Hood, did you have anything you wanted to add? I will also add my rationale when you have added yours.
Thank you, Commissioner Riley. I would like to echo the comments made by Commissioner Rango Morales and Commissioner Taggio. Thank you.
So my rationale for denial is similar to that of Commissioners Taggioff, Rango Morales, and Hood. Specifically, that the variance is that the applicant has not established practical difficulties in complying with the provision. The slope and the setbacks are not related to each other, and maximizing FAR has nothing to do with the practical difficulties related to the slope. So I think that that articulates our rationale for denial and that motion failing. Now we need a second motion. Anybody have one they'd like to make that?
Just curious, Chair, with regards to the last motion, if that was for the CUP and the variances, does the
Correct.
motion fail for both? Or,
Correct, because it's all one application.
okay.
So I think our options are to do something other than what is listed here, which would be to recommend perhaps approval of the conditional use permit for height, denial of the variances. Another option is to lay it over for the next zoning committee meeting. And in the meantime, discuss perhaps with staff what some of our concerns might be. Commissioner Grill.
This is Commissioner Grill. I'm curious. So in lieu of Mr. Warner being here, and without staff having language prepared in advance, my personal preference would be to lay this matter over, so that we have something that's legally binding, and that the city could defend. So that would be my preference.
I will say, from my perspective, I disagree with you, Chair. I think the height is related to the setbacks because the higher they go, the more setback they have to be in, and so the slope would have to deal. It's interrelated with the height. So from at least from my perspective,
That's fair. Yeah.
I would also be in favor of laying it over, only because I would want to give staff an opportunity to see if they can clarify the language about the practical difficulty, given the testimony or the information provided by the applicant today. From my perspective, if but that's what I would like to see.
So it sounds like we're gonna. It sounds like we'd like to. I'd like someone to make a motion to lay this over if the folks who voted in to deny or who voted against the motion would do that. That
This is
would be
Commissioner
great.
Grill.
And at the same time, can you also move to lay over the site plan?
Chair, this is Commissioner Grill. I'd like to make a motion to lay over both items for 470 Lexington, the CUP and variances, as well as the site plan for 2 weeks until our next meeting to allow staff time to comment and prepare.
Thank you, Commissioner Grill. Is there a second?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Rango Morales. Sam, will you take? Is there any discussion on this motion? Sorry. Great. Sam, will you take the roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner Hood,
Yes.
Commissioner Rango Morales,
Yes.
Commissioner Taggio,
Yes.
Commissioner Said,
Yes.
and Chair Riley.
Yes.
6 in favor, 0 opposed.
All right. So we are going to lay those two over. We'll see them under old business at our next zoning committee meeting. And if someone is able, if the people who are concerned about the labor issue will contact Hero, and they're still on the call. That phone number is 651-266-8966. If that's an issue that you feel you need to address with the city, but it is unfortunately not a matter that the zoning committee can entertain. And with that, I think we're done with our business. Is that accurate, Sam?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Have a very happy new year. We'll see you in 2022.
Thanks, Chair. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.